This is a Samsung S series smartphone. Roughly 8 months back, it launched quietly at $649. Now, Samsung technically calls this a mid-ranger, but at that price, it was going up against full-blown flagships like Xiaomi, Vivo, and even OnePlus. Fast forward to 2025, and something crazy happened here. The price has literally crashed, moving it down from the premium mid-range category to a mid-ranger. This wildly shifted the price-to-value ratio, but in the 2025 market, amidst the back-to-back launches, this smartphone is not getting the attention it deserves. So I'm going to reassess the value of the S24 FE according to the revamped pricing, ditching my iPhone 16 and Xiaomi 15 combo for the next 7 days, and find out if this is like a flagship experience at the price of an average mid-ranger. And I'm going to divide this review into 6 key categories, and for every flagship-like experience, Samsung gets a green point, else it's a red point. Starting with the unboxing experience, Samsung actually added a few curves to the usually flat box because who doesn't like curves? Other than that, the experience is a bit too flat. It comes in a slim box and you already know what that means. Well, at least one came off perfect. First, you're of course greeted by the insert containing the USB-C to USB-C cable, the SIM ejector tool, as well as the user manual and warranty documents. Next is of course the phone itself. That was one satisfying peel. And that is all what we have. No back cover, no screen protector, and no charger in the box. It sure does feel like a flagship unboxing according to 2025 standards, whereby 25% of the contents are just missing. But at least you are saving the environment. Okay, when I first saw the phone online, I genuinely thought, wow, this just looks like the S24, and maybe like the S25 up to some extent. But the moment I actually held it in my hand, that is when the reality hit. This phone is so massive that it feels less like a phone and more like a mini tablet. And while it might still look like a flagship, the materials definitely aren't. Especially if you're coming from a frosted glass phone, this just feels cheap. But on the brighter side, this thing is actually shielded by Corning Gorilla Glass Victus Plus in the front as well as on the back. And while I expected the back to get a fair bit of scratches because of the glossy nature, it actually didn't. The glossy back is also surprisingly resistant to fingerprints, but the aluminum frame is the weak point here. I actually tend to drop my phones more often than I'd like to admit, and with this one, a single waist level drop was all it took. Not one, not two, but 3 visible dents on the frame. The front and the back is well shielded, but when a phone falls, it is the corners that are the most vulnerable. And if this is what happens with a single waist level drop, it has some serious build quality issues. But when you flip the phone over, a new set of surprises hit you. It honestly feels strange that a phone carrying Samsung's flagship S series DNA has such thick bezels. And it's not just the size, it's the inconsistency. There is the bigger chin and also a slightly larger forehead. I get it, uniform bezels might need a flexible OLED panel, but even budget brands like the CMF are actually pulling it off. So what's Samsung's excuse? So in terms of design, here is an infrared point for Samsung. This is not even built like a mid-ranger. Now, when it comes to the display quality, this is classic Samsung. It's a Dynamic AMOLED 2X panel, which means deep blacks, vibrant colors, and great contrast, as well as a smooth 120Hz refresh rate. That said, it's not fully dynamic like some LTPO displays. The refresh rate can only drop down to 60Hz on static content, not all the way down to 1Hz like some modern flagships. It also supports HDR, HDR10, and goes up to 1900 nits of brightness. It is okay for outdoor use, but there are also cheaper phones with similar or even brighter displays. Like this is the side-by-side comparison with the Realme Narzo 70 Pro at peak brightness on a sunny morning. Another concern is using PWM dimming instead of DC dimming. Although at high brightness modes, it switches to DC light dimming, at lower brightness, Samsung still uses PWM, and this can contribute to a lot of eye strain since the flicker is more pronounced at low levels. Overall, the display misses some important points. I think it sits somewhere in the middle, like a yellow point. But things actually start to get interesting once you dive into the software. This feels like a proper clean slate. No bloatware, no random pre-installed junk, and best of all, no app folders hiding in your home screen pretending to be an app. The setup is also pretty snappy, clean, and surprisingly minimal. But then I started using One UI, and this thing instantly became my favorite Android skin. Every single element is customizable. You can change the lock screen, add your own wallpaper, and Samsung's Galaxy AI will literally adapt that image to your local weather conditions. You can add widgets, change fonts, adjust colors, and even the system-wide theme can be made to adapt based on your wallpaper. Kinda like Google Google's Material You. And if that is not enough, you can also install Good Lock, and it unlocks a ridiculously powerful suite of customization tools that go way beyond what most Android skins offer. But customization isn't everything. Samsung has taken One UI to the next level with features like DeX mode, which turns your phone into a desktop-like PC when plugged into an external display, which allows you a crazy level of multitasking. It is not perfect, but it's miles ahead of what most phones even attempt. And thanks to Samsung's tight partnership with Microsoft, cross-device syncing, especially with things like Samsung Notes and Microsoft OneNote, just works seamlessly. Even simple things like taking a screenshot or just sharing a specific part of your screen as a screenshot feels intuitive. It is the kind of polish that makes everyday tasks feel seamless. But this isn't where it ends because of the all-new Galaxy AI, and it is a quadrillion times better than Apple Intelligence. It is implemented everywhere inside the system, and it is just waiting to assist you. And I can't just list the number of possible ways this thing is useful. It can transcribe your recordings, summarize them, help you write notes, convert them into simpler bullet points, and even features like sketch to image, remove objects, and more in the Gallery app, which I will be discussing in details in the camera section. All in all, this is a true flagship software, a green point for Samsung. Okay, next is the performance test. In day-to-day tasks, this thing flies. There is not a single moment of stutter. It gives you the true 120Hz experience. I did some light gaming too through Asphalt, and it worked pretty well. However, one thing to note here is the max FPS, which I found to be capped at 90, and that too on a fairly low graphic intensive game like this one, or more like moderate graphic intensive game. I also chained up some 4K and 8K videos together in VN, and the playback is smooth, such that transitions and effects were also handled very well. Export of a 4 minutes of such a video combination took 2 minutes and 55 seconds. The heating was slight but very limited to the upper half, especially near the cameras. Like most devices, the thermals vastly depend on the room temperature too, which is mostly close to 28 degrees Celsius for me, but taking it outside in the sun where the temperatures go as high as 37, even simple tasks can heat it up like crazy. But more on that later in the CPU throttle test. I also did a Geekbench, and here are the benchmark scores. Just for a comparison, this was the score with One UI 6, so I guess there was a tiny improvement after the One UI update, but at the same time, I guess it also falls within the normal fluctuations that you might expect. To understand the performance better, I ran a 5 minutes throttling test, and the graph looks fantastic. In fact, it performs even better than the flagship Xiaomi 15 in terms of sustained performance. But there's a massive catch. This phone gets extremely hot. During the test, it nearly burned my hand, especially around the aluminum frame. It's not just uncomfortable, it's borderline unsafe. And even after putting down the phone, I had a lingering burning sensation in my palm. This chip doesn't strike the right balance between performance and thermal safety. It pushes for high numbers at the cost of user comfort and long-term battery life. So it is definitely a red point from me. Next, let us talk about the cameras. And honestly, it does not disappoint here. This thing comes with a beefy 50MP main camera with f1.8 aperture, followed by 12MP ultrawide and 8MP telecamera. The shots consistently look good, sharp, clear, and none of that overexposed, super high contrasty images. The dynamic range is also great across all of the images. It is not iPhone level, but details are very well maintained, especially against harsh backlit scenes. And the interesting part is how consistent the shots look across the three lenses, because even though they have different resolutions, all of them can shoot at 12MP, such that even the telecamera is upscaled to 12MP, even though it has an 8MP sensor with the help of the main camera. What I really liked is the portrait mode. It is just so perfect. The edge detection is not only spot on, but even works for very complex scenes like shooting leaves and trees, where even high-end phones like the iPhone 16 falls apart. It is not always 100% perfect, but in such scenes it is still much better. There is no dedicated macro mode, but Samsung uses the main camera when you try to take up very close-up shots. It is not better than some phones like the iPhone or even the Xiaomi 15, which repurposes some of the lenses as a macro lens because of having a very close focal length, but it is still better than one of those phones which come with a very low resolution dedicated macro lens. Zoomed photos do benefit from the tele lens, but the 8MP resolution with the f2.4 aperture is a major limiting factor. What I think these images need is a little AI upscaling, like what Xiaomi does. If you compare them side by side, you will notice that the Xiaomi 15 takes much clearer images, but much of that clarity comes from AI processing. You can turn it off if you want to, but it is one of those good to have features for a low-end tele lens. And Samsung themselves also know that their telecamera is not very powerful, and hence under very low light or even when shooting up close images, it often switches to the main camera and then crops in to take the shot. Now, it is evident from the EXIF data of the images that are captured. In some of the images, you will find that the f-stop is f1.8 in the 3x plus zoom, and in some images it is set to 2.4. So it can be understood that it is the main camera sometimes and sometimes the actual tele camera. And talking about low light photography, they are also great, and by great I mean surprisingly good across all the three lenses, and big thanks to Samsung's processing here. It is literally insane. Like if you notice the before and after shot images, there is a hell and heaven difference. In some of the shots, the subject is not even visible, and then when you take the photo, you're going to see it. But the differences do start to show up under very low light, and a lot of weird things start to happen, especially in the other two back lenses, that is the tele lens as well as the ultra wide lens. But there is one thing that you might have already noticed across all the shots, that is the lack of a proper focusing system. These cameras are just so hard to focus properly on a subject that very often a perfect shot just gets ruined. And every time you try to tap and focus, it often fails and refocuses back to the background. And if you try to lock it, it stays locked, but often it switches to the background and then it locks in. And it actually got so very annoying at certain times that I thought I wished I just had my Xiaomi with me. You might have the sharpest camera on the planet, but that does not help when the autofocus system is faulty. Every shot will get ruined. The main camera can take videos up to 8K 30 FPS, which is surprisingly smooth as well as stable, all thanks to the OIS. But the increase in quality depends largely on the lighting conditions. Sometimes you're just better off shooting at 4K because of the better processing as well as the smaller file size. It also can shoot up to 4K 60 FPS, but if you want lens interchangeability, you need to switch to 4K 30, since that is a max supported FPS on the other two cameras. Now, in terms of clarity, it works well under good lighting condition. The tuning is also pretty impressive for the three cameras. They look very consistent, and most of the time you won't be able to tell that if they switched lenses or it's using the same lens for the three different shots. The dynamic range is also great, but things drastically change under low light, especially with the other two cameras. It is just bad, and I think that is because of the over-processing on Samsung. It is still okay to get noisy footage under low light because that is expected, but trying to fix it real time is the reason why everything is falling apart here. And that becomes more evident when you're keeping the camera still, because the images just look much better in that way, and when you try to move the camera, the picture just gets very blurry and weird. And all these things get further pronounced in the ultra-wide camera because of the lack of OIS. There are all the other interesting features like slow motion at 4K 120 FPS, which is not even in the Xiaomi 15 or in the iPhone 16. The portrait video mode at 4K, which works fine, although it does not support focus shifting like the iPhone. The same is supported on the front camera up to 4K 30 FPS. And talking about video in the front camera, this 10MP camera can squeeze out 4K 60 FPS video, which looks genuinely good, and there is decent amount of dynamic range and good color reproduction. All in all, the camera experience is pretty solid. But what is even more interesting than the camera is Galaxy AI in the Galaxy app, and I honestly don't know where to start. You can make small things ridiculously huge, add almost any random thing inside an image just by roughly sketching what you want, remove any element perfectly if it is distracting, or even reposition a particular element or thing if required. This is literally like Photoshop on steroids on your palm. It's insane. And it doesn't end here. There is also a very cool slow motion feature whereby you can literally press and hold on any video and it converts into a slow motion. This thing is pretty graphic intensive, even on certain RTX GPUs like the 2050 running on laptops, what we essentially call optical flow. But in this case, it is even better and realistic, also works instantly on a smartphone. So as a conclusion, I think Samsung deserves a green point here, although I still have pretty strong complaints with the autofocus capabilities. Okay, now last but not the least is the battery. The 4700 mAh battery can squeeze out up to 7 to 8.5 hours of screen on time. This includes a mix of high performance tasks like gaming, camera usage, along with low performance tasks like scripting, typing and browsing. Heavy usage can actually reduce it to 6 hours, by the way. But anyway, Here is the charge drop each hour for various activities tested in this period. It is okay, but one major problem is the lack of a fast charging speed. This thing only supports up to 25 watts of fast charging, and that takes up to 1 hour 30 minutes to charge the battery completely from 20 to 100%. But I don't think that is fast according to 2025 standards, especially against other Chinese brands. The phone also comes with a 15-watt wireless charging support. All in all, it is okay in terms of battery efficiency, but I don't like slow charging speeds, so it is a reluctant green point from me. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video, and if you stayed till here, thank you so much for watching. Do like, share and subscribe, and if you want to support the channel further and fund independent tech reviews like this one, you can actually directly donate as low as $1, which will entirely be used for buying tech gadgets for review on this channel. And it also gives you some extra perks like influence the type of contents posted on this channel. So again, thank you so much for watching. Do like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.